I think the fact that we're moving forward with an update on how we spend our money and a prioritization of how we spend our money is incredibly important. I would have been and would be, if somehow we failed to do our job today, very disappointed if we think that the priorities of a year ago have to be the exact same priorities today. Now, many of them will be the same, but many of them won't. And so all of these appropriating committees that have worked together, House and Senate, have come to a process where we'll have 12 bills, not debated on the floor as intensively as I would like to have seen them debated. That should be our goal for this year. But 12 bills where House members, Senate members, Republicans, and Democrats came together and said, what should our priorities be? In the committee that I chair, the Labor and Education and Health and Human Services Committee, dollar-wise, after you take defense off the table, that's the biggest of the committees and in some ways has the most challenging debates as to where we wind up in these areas. But I think we've made good choices that hopefully can be improved on next year, but I'm absolutely confident are better than last year. And it's really important, Mr. President, for the people who we work for to understand that we had to make choices. There's very little difference in the money that was spent, that will be spent this year, in the money that was spent last year, but there is a difference in priorities. I think in the Labor, Education, Health and Human Services Committee, we've either eliminated or consolidated in a dramatic way 28 programs so that we could find that money and use it for what we now believe to be a better purpose. One of those better purposes would be an increase for the second year in a row and the second year in the last 14 years in health research at the National Institute of Health. 12 years with no increase at all, and now 2 back-to-back years trying to get us back to the research buying power we were at 12 years ago. And again, programs that weren't performing, many of them wound up with a zero appropriation in both of these last 2 years so that the NIH appropriation could increase. At a time when we're looking at precision medicine, when we're looking at immunotherapy, when we no longer look at cancer as just cancer and throw everything at it you want to throw at it, but in fact look at the individual cancer, and we're at a moment, because of what we understand that we didn't understand a decade ago, where you can look at the individual cancer and the individual patient and figure out how that patient has unique potential to fight that cancer in their body. To look at things that may not be required from people in cancer and other diseases and think, if we could figure out which people need this procedure and which people don't, not only do you not pay for the procedure for people who don't need it, but also people don't go through the physical challenge of procedures they don't need. Alzheimer's, one of the growing concerns in American families today, right up there now with cancer as one of the things that people worry about most as they look to the future. If we could reduce the onset of Alzheimer's by an average of 5 years, we'd be spending almost 50% less in 2050 than we will be otherwise, and the 2050 spending of tax dollars in Alzheimer's care will overwhelm the budget, but research commitments can do something about that. The Labor, Health and Human Services bill puts us back to where in the school year that begins next fall, we'll be back to year-round Pell. And what does that mean? What's year-round Pell as opposed to what we have now? Well, right now we have 2 semesters where you could qualify for the Pell Grant. Now, the Pell Grant is given based on income and need, and if you qualify for full Pell, Mr. President, I believe in your state, and I know in my state, there's no community college where full Pell doesn't pay for all tuition, all books, all fees. If you're at that level of need where you qualify for the full Pell Grant, you have other things you have to worry about to sustain yourself, but paying for school is not one of them. And if you're an adult going back to school, if you're someone paying for your own school with your own effort, if you're the first person in your family to hope to graduate from school Anything that disrupts whatever pattern you're in minimizes the chances that you achieve your goal. So if you've got things working in the fall and the spring, and you can also stay in a summer term, not only do you get done quicker, but you don't disrupt the pattern you found yourself in. For 8 years now, we haven't had year-round Pell. This vote we'll take today allows that to happen, and it will make a big difference. It'll also make a difference when you're in a program where you're being prepared to do a job that's uniquely available or available in your community. It's pretty hard to explain why, well, we could do this and we've got ways to pay for it up through the fall and spring, but by the summer, we just have to take a break. That's not a very easy thing to explain to an employer who has come to your community because you have that training potential in your community. And the third major allocation of money that had to come from somewhere else is opioid abuse. This bill will increase by 430% our commitment on this issue, and it's not because we had $650 million new dollars to spend on opioid abuse. It's because in many places in our country today, many states in our country, more people die from opioid abuse, die from overdoses than die from car accidents. It's because many families are destroyed by the addiction to prescription drugs that leads to other drugs when those prescription drugs can't be available, and frankly, the abuse of prescription drugs in some cases where they are available. Looking at new ways to deal with pain, looking at new ways to deal with this growing problem. In 2014 and 15, in each of those years, more than 1,000 people in Missouri died of drug overdoses. If in my state and most states you're a fire department that also has a first responders unit, you're 3 times more likely to respond to a drug overdose than you are in the average fire department than you are to a fire. And so there's a third area where this bill prioritizes what needs to be done. In the Individuals with Disability Act, Title I, charter schools, all those things have a new focus as this bill passes. The mental health initiatives, rural health care, Head Start, all are benefited by a reprioritization of what happens here, as are veterans workforce issues and Job Corps issues. Mr. President, I think this bill is far from perfect, but it's better than the way we're spending our money today, better than we were spending our money a year and a half ago, and hopefully it won't be quite as good as the way we spend our money starting October 1. So we need to get this work done and get started immediately doing the business of setting priorities, making difficult choices, and spending people's money in a way that has a long-term plan to benefit them, their families, and our growing economy. And I look forward to that vote later today, and then to have, I would hope, as I know the Majority Leader hopes, a greater effort this year than ever before to get these bills on the floor, to have them fully debated. Best possible thing would be to pass them one at a time, put them on the president's desk one at a time. But the next best thing is to look at the bills and reach individual conclusions about these individual bills, and that's what the bill before us today does. And I urge its passage, Mr. President, and note the absence of a quorum.